Hello and welcome to Dumi's Daily Grind. My name is Dumi and thank you so much for joining me today. I have created this channel to share my life experiences, inspirations I found from others, lessons I have learned, and things I have been taught throughout various periods of my life, especially the ones related to sobriety, finding serenity, and general mental health topics with spiritual growth at the forefront. Please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and please support the channel by becoming a Patreon. The link is available below. Now, today, I really want to delve into something I have been dealing with the whole week, or something that I have been studying in the last week. And this topic literally comes from Freud and her daughter Anna, and it breaks down the defense mechanisms that we use as individuals to protect ourselves from anxiety as such. Now, we learn these defense mechanisms as we grow up, as we go through life, as we experience whatever it is that we need to experience. And based on our experiences, we are then employ these defense mechanisms when we find ourselves in a place that threatens our peace and causes us anxiety. Now, there's a number of these defense mechanisms that a lot of us use. More are common. There's some that are more common than others. But I thought, let me just break it down and see which ones I have employed during my life, and which ones I still employ, and which ones I have stopped employing. So the first one I would like to look at is what is called displacement, and displacement is basically when one is upset with a certain situation, and instead of confronting that specific situation, they would take out their anger on objects that are less intimidating. An example of this I would take from the videos that Amber Heard presented in court during their case with Johnny Depp, where you can see Johnny Depp hitting cupboards in frustration. And this is one of the examples of what happens when we utilize the displacement defense mechanism. So basically, you take out your anger on things that aren't able to hurt you back, so to speak. The second one is called denial. And denial is when we take things that we cannot cope with currently, and sort of do not acknowledge that they're actually there, that they actually exist. It's more like, as an example, I would say in the life of an addict, when your family says to you, listen, we think you have got a problem with the substance that you're using, and you turn around and say, nah, I don't have a problem. This is the way I act. This is the way I drink. And denialism is one of those defense mechanisms that we in a really anxiety causing situation. The following defense mechanism that they speak about is called repression. And repression is basically keeping information and burying it so low, deep down in your subconscious or your unconscious mind, to try and ensure that it doesn't come back up to your awareness. So you basically take that emotion, take that situation, and you utilize your mind's power to literally just bury it as deep down as possible, as you can, to in the attempt to try really to forget. This will happen especially when we're children, and as helpless children, we have an adult who does something to us, using their authority, their power, their position in the family to abuse us as children. And because we trust the adult to do the right thing, and we are hurt but what it is that they are doing to us, that it is sometimes a coping mechanism that is utilized very often to just repress the situation and repress the emotions that are linked to what has happened to us. Then we look at sublimation, which is the conversion of terrible behavior that we are involved in. So we convert these horrible behaviors and we turn them into more societal acceptable behaviors. So that is called sublimation. And then we look at projection. Projection is the ascribing of one's own feelings towards others. And I heard about projection a lot. I hear a lot about projection when people say, no, stop projecting. And for me, I pictured it as a projector. I'm in an audiovisual space. So a projector is something that you will plug into a laptop, into a computer, and it will take that image or that information or that report and project it onto a screen that everybody can look at and everybody can see. So projection is basically ascribing one's feelings or deeds straight into another individual or other individuals or a society as a whole. Then we look at intellectualization. Intellectualization, that's really a long word, but intellectualization is basically a defense mechanism that we would apply in situations where we either have a lot of information around the topic, or we know exactly what it is that we need to say in a scientific manner, in a factual manner, using information that already exists to avoid the the thinking of the wrongdoing, to avoid those specific thing, and through using intellectual facts, if you know what I mean. So, as an example, another example that I would like to use here is when it comes to an addiction such as coffee or smoking cigarettes. This is an addiction that doesn't directly affect others, unlike substance abuse. However, when we are confronted with the situation and someone comes and says, listen, your use of coffee or tobacco products is really bad for your health, and you change, you intellectualize your use of of these products by saying things like, but coffee helps me wake up in the morning, coffee gives me focus, nicotine has got effects that allow me to calm down, to relax, etc. So you're using things that everybody knows that are facts, that are available to everybody, and you use those excuses for the wrong behaviors that you're doing. But although you're using those facts, it doesn't mean that it applies to you. It's literally just an excuse that we use as a defense mechanism. The next one is called rationalization. Rationalization is a defense mechanism I have used a lot in the past. And I remember when I first heard about rationalization was when somebody was asking me a question to say, related to my use of alcohol. And they asked me a question and they said, but you do know that drinking excessively is really bad for your health and your mental well-being. And the rationalization that I used to use behind that specific comment or that specific observation from somebody who cared about me was basically, I used logical excuses to explain my unacceptable behavior, so to speak, like unacceptable behavior. So I would use something that is logic. It's the use of logical reasoning, even though you know that those logical reasons that you're using do not apply to your situation. But you bring them up. You bring them up. You bring up things like, no, but it has been scientifically proven in this century that a glass of wine every single day is good for you. And you may refer to another example of coffee and say, but a cup of coffee is good for the heart. It is good to help you focus. And you will use all of these excuses to rationalize your unacceptable behavior. So rationalization is one of those defense mechanisms that I am truly aware of, and I've used it quite a lot in my life. And then we move to regression. Regression is quite common. In my environment, regression is quite common. So I see it in adults, and it's really easy to spot, because what then happens is somebody will literally call you out on something, and you do not like what it is that they say, okay, and you do not agree with it. But instead of handling it, speak, you revert back to what you used to do when you were 5 years old, or what you used to do when you were 2 years old, and what you used to do when you were 7 or 8. An example of this is having temper tantrums because somebody has raised something that may be valid at that point, but because you don't know how to deal with it and it's an anxiety causing situation, you literally just revert back to those defense mechanisms that you used to use when you were a child. An example of this, I might say, would be when some adults, when they're upset and they're feeling emotionally attacked in some way, you would find that they completely lose their minds. They start acting like a 2-year-old that has found themselves in the sweets aisle in the supermarket, and they ask for something and you say, no, you cannot have the sweet. What do? They throw a temper tantrum in the middle of your shopping experience, and you'll have this massive temper tantrum. Or with others, the regression defense mechanism would then mean that they would become passive. They would go sit in a corner somewhere and be by themselves and not talk to you, and use that as a way to avoid the anxiety that they're feeling at the moment. Now, there is another one that they call reaction for, and you become aware that you have hurt somebody, you have done something that is unacceptable to that specific person, and in response to deal with the anxiety that comes with your actions, you use the reaction formation, which is doing the opposite. You do the opposite from what has caused you the stress, what has caused you the anxiety. So, what do I mean by that? If somebody is rude to you, as an example, and you dislike them much, so when you employ the reaction formation defense mechanism, you would basically give this person a call and be extra nice to them and have extra nice conversations. It's basically dealing with somebody you really dislike and pretending to like them a lot so that you can deal with your own anxieties instead of dealing with the actual situation at hand. So it's doing the exact opposite of the anxiety causing situation that you find yourself in. Then there are other defense mechanisms that have been summarized by Anna Freud. Now, Anna Freud was Freud's daughter, who is really key in summarizing the whole defense mechanism structure. And she used most of the information from her father's writing, Freud, and she really summarized it properly so that we can better understand what these defense mechanisms are and in what situations we would employ these defense mechanisms. So she looks at the other defense mechanisms, such as acting out, aim, inhibition, altruism, avoidance, compensation, dissociation, fantasy, humor, and there's the one that I like really that is called undoing. Now, if I understand undoing properly, it basically means that when you realize that your behaviors have been unfavorable towards a certain individual, what you then do is you create a situation where you try to undo your actions by doing nice things for that person. So in a romantic relationship, I think that's a good example in a romantic relationship where you had a fight with your wife, and to make things right with your wife, you go out and you buy her roses, and you come home and you give her the roses. You try to undo the situation that you found yourself in, and you'll do whatever it is, whatever it takes for to fix that situation, which I find very interesting. And another interesting one in the other defense mechanisms that we what's the word I'm looking for? That we practice, or we put in place when necessary, is fantasy, where one would literally leave the real the real world. You will leave the real world and get into your mind and imagine all of these wonderful things that you would enjoy doing. Literally just fantasizing about what situations they could be. And then one of the other ones that I just want to get into literally is dissociation. And I think dissociation is really self-explanatory. Um, a lot of children do this, and it's so amazing how childhood behaviors just carry on with us as we become adults. And what has worked for us as we were children, we will use in those situations that we know are going to be very difficult for us to deal with. Now, these defense mechanisms come from the unconscious psyche, which we have repressed when we were children, or we were repressed when we went through a specific situation. And they come back up when we find ourselves in a similar situation, and we need to find means to protect ourselves against the anxiety that everybody gets. Now, remember, anxiety is a primitive, anxious, no, it's a primitive feeling that is linked to our biology, that allows us to take action, especially when we are afraid, especially when there might be danger existing in front of us. Anxiety is a good instinctual feeling that we all have as human beings. And some of us have it more than others. Some of us have chronic anxiety, but most people have acute anxiety. So we will use some of these defense mechanisms to deal with the situation at hand. Sometimes we deal with defense mechanisms to buy us time. Sometimes we use these defense mechanisms to avoid the confrontation as a whole. And because it is based on the unconscious and it's controlled through what Freud mentions as the id, when he talks about the id, the superego, and the ego, and the roles that those play in our psyche, in our decision-making processes, in how we look to the world, in our moral campus, in all of those things. So these defense mechanisms are tools that we have, that we keep deep down in our unconscious. And once we are aware of these defense mechanisms, then we can literally start working on getting healthier ways to deal with the situations that we find ourselves in, so that we can grow as individuals and we can be aware of what is it that makes us who we are and how we can change and make it better, so that we are not viewed as people that people cannot communicate with, because we raise something, especially when they raise something that is automatic and is put there to help us to grow. Then we can be aware with our reaction what defense mechanisms are the ones that we use on a daily basis, and just find ways to find more constructive ways of taking the criticism, more constructive ways of reacting to the world, and more constructive ways to become a better person. When we are on this journey of change, is yes, what is it I can do as Dumi, as an individual, to improve some of these things? So yeah, so I found that very interesting. And I think in the next episode, I'll be talking about the Freud's levels of unconsciousness, the struggles that we have in our decision making process that is literally contributed, according to Freud's theory, is heavily influenced by the id, the ego, and the superego. So that should be interesting, and that will come up in my next episode. So thank you so much for watching this episode on defense mechanisms. I really appreciate that you stayed until the end. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because every time I release an episode, you'll be the first one to know that there's a new episode out. So do that for me, and I'd like to say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I love you lots.